Welcome, nice to see everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:02. Up first, we have our consent agenda. We have prior minutes from, everything okay? Oh, okay. We have prior minutes from October 16th and November 4th for the special board meeting minutes. We have a number of policy reads. Any discussion, concerns about anything in the consent agenda? All right, so I will make a motion then to accept the consent agenda. We'll do that by roll. Akua?
Aye.
Emily?
I was here, so I'm gonna abstain.
Okay. Oh, well, that's not a quorum of the board then.
You don't need a quorum for
It's
that.
okay for the motion. Okay. Zach? Oh, he wasn't either, so Mary is an aye, so we have 2 ayes. Okay. Moving on to our public comment, recognition of visitors. I understand that Jared is just observing, not speaking tonight, correct, Courtney?
Correct.
And no one in the room with us, okay. So that brings us to our spotlight with our student services, Michelle Thresh.
So
Oh, I'm sorry, let me back up. Yes, Lynn, you told me that, and
okay.
we're gonna do some introductions first, since we have a new SU board person joining us, so, maybe we'll go around, we'll start, Gab, if you wanna start, and we'll go around and do introductions.
Sure, I'm Gabrielle Lumber, I'm the Director of Instruction and Learning.
Michelle Irish, I'm the Director for the Advancement of Educational Equity. Melissa Wood, Early Ed Director.
Michelle Birch, Director of Student Services. Robin Donne, Assistant Director of Student Services.
Very nice.
Zach Dorman, board member.
Heather Moore, Lead Director. Emily Norris, Board Member.
Lynn Coda Superintendent, I just want to thank Zach. He was, there was a long pause in the thinking, and appreciate you.
It was hard to sit down.
We're gonna give up.
And do you want to introduce yourself?
Last but not least.
Okay.
Jamie McAllister, Director of Human Resources.
And then we've got Akua. Akua, you wanna introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Akua Smith is my name. I'm on the Enosburg Richford board, as well as obviously the FNESU board. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And Dawn?
And Dawn Reed, I'm the food service director.
Great, okay, apologies for that oversight. Great, we're glad to have you on board, Zach. Thank you for being here. So we'll move on to Michelle's spotlight.
Alrighty. So I'm going to do a little, talk about some data that recently in September, Lynn has been talking about the agency putting on some listening tours, and they did a special education director's retreat. And in that, they provided what they're calling Vermont's landscape of data related to special education. So with that, I decided to come back and look at FNESU data to compare it to what they gave for the state. But I just want to highlight that it's not comparing apples to apples, because I used current data, so this school year's data, and I compared it to the data that they provided, which is 2022, 2023 data, but I would predict that it's not a huge difference in numbers. So just want to throw that out there, that when we're looking at this information. So to start off, in FNESU, we have 337 students pre-K to 12 that are eligible for special education. 10.6% of those students are diagnosed with autism, 7.7% emotional disturbance. And I'll give you a second to look at the numbers. I just want to highlight that Vermont emotional disturbance is rated at 13.72%, and the national average is 4%. But overall, the total percentage of students in special education at FNESU is in line with Vermont and national numbers. So from there, I wanted to look at the least restrictive environment. So again, we have
what that is, Michelle.
Yep, so when we write an IEP, we have to determine based on students' goals and services, what the most appropriate amount of time in the classroom is. So obviously always looking for 80% or more of the time to be in the classroom, the gen ed classroom. And so you will see that 81.3% of students on IEPs are fully included in classrooms, which is in line with the 2022 data for Vermont. And again, Vermont has 14,106 students on IEPs. So in FNESU, 4.45% of students are in the classroom, 40% to 79%. And what I'd like to highlight is in FNESU, we have 0 students that are in a separate school, which means an independent school outside of FNESU placement, where FNESU does have alternative programs, which I've spoken to you about before, and that would be 13.6% of our students are either in STEPS or RISE. So what the state wanted to show us is they compared some educational environments with other states that has this similar numbers of students on IEPs as Vermont. And so North Dakota and Wyoming were the 2 states that they chose to compare us to. And then they threw in New Hampshire as a neighboring state, but you can see that they have over twice as many students on in special ed. But what they were trying to show us is that 5.27% of the students in Vermont are in separate schools, but North Dakota has 0.5, Wyoming has 0.55, and New Hampshire, who has twice as many students as us, only has 1.26% of their students in separate schools. And so that got me thinking, and came back here, looking at our numbers, and did some research, and North Dakota and Wyoming and New Hampshire have in-house programs like FNESU has begun, and that's why their numbers look like that, but the rest of Vermont has not caught up to that.
Did it say what they're,
I'm gonna find that, I was looking for that to compare.
Is the criteria for kids on IEPs in New Hampshire different than it is in Vermont? To see just the number that's told, or the states similar? It was just interesting.
The population.
population's
Yeah,
got a lot
population's
higher.
bigger, yeah.
So New Hampshire has 28,000, whereas Vermont has like 14.
She's wondering why they have so many kids on IEPs, I think. is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm
Total
asking.
number of students in New Hampshire might be.
That much,
Yeah.
I guess I was just surprised that the number was double, but I guess, yeah.
The population's a lot higher.
So then I wanted to look, because I have the RISE program and in STEPS, I wanted to look at the comparable states for students with autism. And so in Vermont, in FNESU, we have 0 students with autism in a separate school, but in Vermont, 9.01% of the students with diagnosed with autism are in a separate school. And you can see that Wyoming, North Dakota, and New Hampshire are much less than that. And 2.9% of the students in RISE are students with autism. Next slide. So then I also wanted to look at students with emotional disturbance, and this is what the state highlighted for us that was pretty enlightening, is that at FNESU we have 0 students diagnosed with emotional disturbance in a separate school, but in the state of Vermont, 19.65% of students with emotional disturbance on IEPs are in a separate school. The other states really are less. And we have 4.5% of our students with emotional disturbance are in the STEPS program.
And what type of things fall under the umbrella of emotional disturbance?
So there's a lot of discussion going on around that in the state right now, actually, where before it was a big umbrella for anxiety, ADHD, and emotional disturbance, and we have teased that out now. So you will see on the third slide that I showed that other health impairment has increased because they have teased that out where like ADHD and anxiety fall under other health impairment. Emotional disturbances has happened over a 6-month period of time. Has a variety of qualifications.
Do we track down around the kids who have that ED diagnosis and, like whether or not they're DCF custody or not?
We have that data. I'm just curious, yeah, I don't have that here. I don't know,
Ask your question again. Wondering out of the kids that we have in our system who have that diagnosis, how many of those kids are in DCF custody?
Are or have been,
Are currently, I guess, if this is current data, I'm just curious. I don't know,
we could.
I'm just interested.
Well, there is a little trend that we're starting to see related to DCF in placements. There appears to be, if I go there?
Yep.
There appears to be a little bit of a trend when kids are struggling and they're in custody. Not every school has the program that we do. And some students with this level of need are getting placed within our communities because of this program.
Gotcha, okay.
So I think my guess is that you may see a higher percentage, but we just need to know that that may be some students who have been in FNESU, but it also may be students that are placed here because of that program.
So then I was wondering, so 2021 is when we first started a version of STEPS. It was definitely not where it is currently. But I wanted to go back and look, and we calculated, Robin and I, how many students have had some version of services and supports from STEPS. We came up with, there's 48 students. And so then I wanted to figure out how many of those students transitioned back to their sending school, and there are 33% of the kids that have had some sort of involvement in STEPS have transitioned back. 10.4% of them have dropped out. 6.25 have moved out of our district, and then 6.25 have graduated. And then last is, just wanted to share a cost breakdown for 2024-2025 budget. RISE costs around $36,000 for a student to attend there, and STEPS is at $56,000, which is a little bit higher than the last calculation, and it's because we added the counselor that was very much needed that I didn't have before. And the Laramie, Soar, and Belkate numbers are recent. That was just released, I think, 2 weeks ago. And some of those are like, I chose the middle level. They have a variety of levels depending on student need, but you can see how the cost comparison, and I just threw in that this cost does not include any transportation.
And
That would be
summer.
in addition to that, and does not include summer services. Correct.
Do our numbers include summer services? So you're talking about easily well over $100,000 for some of those out.
Easy.
minimum transportation
Right.
is 30,000.
Well, right, I
That's minimum.
remember signing the warrants on those transportation bills.
And summer can be 12,
Summer can be
15 a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all I have. Great. Other than, I think we're way ahead of the game, so, feeling good about our programs.
I think I'll just add on to what Michelle said. We have Michelle and her team have presented, and Robin presented at a statewide conference. I actually presented about these programs at an all-member superintendent meeting, and a lot of superintendents and some special ed directors have reached out to Michelle to come visit or to talk with her about how we're approaching these programs. I want to just make sure to state we're not diminishing the need for those alternative programs in the mental health realm. They are completely needed, and I'm not even judging the cost. Those are the true costs of operating those programs. We built this program out of necessity when there were no options, and there's still pretty limited options for accessing those alternative program spaces. But I think the reality is that we're meeting a need with the students who really need this level of intensive intervention, and we're having 33% is pretty good if you're looking at the number of students that you've been able to build those skills and then transition them back into the classroom. I would be interested in looking at longitudinal data about when we didn't have our internal, we didn't plant this, I just saw the look between your two faces, like, what does the data look like in terms of like transitioning back? I just know from being a principal for a long time, it was really hard to transition back when students went out of district. So that might be future data to dig in and see like what percentage.
And I'll just highlight that the 16 students that transitioned back might have been to the classroom, might have been into very flexible scheduling within the high school setting. So it wasn't always like back to the 80+% in the classroom. So some of those numbers were, I'd say, if I had to estimate based on the data, there's 3 or 4 students that have had alternative options because maybe STEPS itself wasn't the best option either. So there's certainly still like really good conversations about this program doesn't work, why didn't it, and what is needed. And we've worked with a couple of principals that have really been able to think outside the box, and with supports and resources available within their building, we've been able to create some real creative options that have also then led for some of those kids to get back to the classroom 80+% of the time. So
And flexible pathways.
Flexible pathways, and we also have a good team of behavior specialists or BCBAs that can be in the schools to help with the transitions that we were lacking some of that
I
before.
think you also have mentioned before that the kids who transitioned back, when they came to you, they came with at least, they had at least a one-on-one in the school, and they're going back without that support largely, so that they're going back as more independent students. And I can speak a little bit to that number of kids transitioning back and the time these programs have been in place. I used to work in an alternative program that was not on the board, but because it's closed. And one of the things that we struggled the most with is getting kids to be able to transition back, partly because the distance was too far to do really, really well planned transitions. So Michelle's program is really ideal for making that able to happen.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. We all appreciate it. All right, Morgan, you're up.
No, we still do not have a draft audit yet, so we will go right into the budget discussion in the slideshow. Zach, because this is your first go around at the SU board, if you have questions, please ask during the meeting, or you can reach out to me afterwards as well. It works a little bit differently than the district level board meetings, budget discussions. So we are at our sort of second board meeting discussing budgets. Again, for this year local boards, we are expecting to have a yield number on December 1st. We will actually have some draft CLA numbers on the 1st. And then by the 15th, so before your next meeting, we will have a first draft of ADM figures. Those are the 3 numbers that are going to be driving the local tax rate. There's no separate SU tax rate, but we know that you keep those in the back of your mind as we discuss this budget. Board goals we've discussed in your local meetings, and we'll continue to put those up front and center as we go over the budget. We also discuss enrollment at your local meetings. In this case, we're just showing the two districts as a whole. So again, in the next 5 years, predicting NNV's numbers will increase a bit, ER's numbers will stay relatively flat. And again, as you've heard me say before, this is bucking the statewide trend, especially in southeastern Vermont, where they're seeing some pretty precipitous declines in enrollment. SU total numbers, we are predicting that we'll add about 100 kids in the next few years. So not an insignificant jump for Franklin Northeast. Budget considerations, again, similar to what we've discussed in your local board meetings. Health insurance up 12%. We're in negotiations for FY26 with both your support staff and your teachers union. We had a few fractional people still left in the ARP ESSER grant through the end of September this year. So we're catching those little bits in this budget. Proposing at this point to use $139,000 of your fund balance to basically buy down the assessment, similar to how in the local discussions we use that leftover money to buy down tax rates, or we go to the board to the voters to ask for the ability to use that for capital reserves. At the SU level, you 6 are the voters, so when you pass the budget, you're really deciding what to do with that fund balance that comes through each year. And then the census block grant, which was part of Act 173, probably, a few years ago. We are in, I think it's the second to last year of transition, moving away from that reimbursement model for special ed that we had in the past to getting a chunk of money based on your student count. And so we're seeing a pretty hefty increase in revenue for that. We have gone over the staffing changes in an earlier meeting, and I don't think there are any changes except to the special ed section of the budget. So as I said, we've got some people moving in from ESSER, the quarter of the director of the advancement of educational equity, and 3 1/4 pieces of our 3 instructional coaches. We are moving a little bit of Mary Ellis out of the CFP grant into the SU budget. That's primarily due to restrictions in the CFP money and how we can spend it. It will free up a little CFP money that you can then use to fund some of those local interventionists that are supporting your schools outside of your local general fund budget. And then moving a half-time support person from the general fund budget to the special ed budget. Again, it's not a new position. It's just recognizing where they're spending their work. Food service, really no changes to staff, just kind of drilling in some of the hours that a couple of the people were working. So essentially that's flat year over year. In special education, the draft in front of you is proposing adding 2 special education teachers and 4 more BCBAs. The special ed teachers are primarily to help at those alternative programs, and the BCBAs are primarily to get more support out to the schools. Unless Michelle tells me that I have that backwards or different. Reducing 1 paraeducator of this budget. Again, I mentioned bringing a half-time clerical position in from the general fund. Not filling 3 NCSS positions that we have in the budget. They're all positions we haven't been able to fill or the needs have moved on. So it's not, those aren't humans that we currently pay for in the budget. And then some minor reductions here and there to the occupational therapy, physical therapy hours that we contract and custodial at the alternative programs. And then no changes to the ELL staffing model that we have now, although we haven't been able to fill that second position full-time yet. So we're still hoping that we'll be able to do that in FY26. I sent you by email a bunch of documents. 4 of them are detailing the staffing that we have in each of those 4 functional areas that we just went through. And just to kind of reorient people to that, and we won't go over it in any great detail here. On those 4 FTE reports, you'll see that it's broken out first by the location that they're working. Then there's the budget unit, which is the string of numbers where we charge them to the employee name, their title, and their FTE. And so if you want to crosswalk who the people are that are in different parts of the budget, this will help you to do that. We have made a change this year compared to prior years in terms of really working a lot harder on where we can put somebody like the instructional coaches or the educational technology specialist here, how we can better allocate their time to the schools that they're spending their time in. So you'll see a lot more detail broken up by location than you have in previous years for staffing. The smallest file that I sent you is the recap of the budget. There's only a small section here just so I can walk you through the layout. It has 2 sections. The first section is going to be the general fund, and then the revenue for the general fund, which is the numbers that drive your assessment and drive the charges below the budget. The second section on that page is the bill back staff that we have. So in that case, it would be somebody like the pre-K paras are now paid out of the supervisory union, but we charge them back to schools because we know Innisford High School doesn't have any pre-K paraeducators, Richford High School doesn't have any pre-K paraeducators. So we're trying to allocate those specific costs to the schools where they live. In terms of the columns on this, you'll see the kind of the big picture, general education, special education, the different support categories where we spend our money. The FY24 column is true, what we spent in those categories. The FY25 budget is the budget that we're living in right now. That middle column is going to give us what we anticipate expenses are through the end of December. And then the FY26 proposed budget is the budget that we will be discussing tonight and next month, and eventually approving and then sending the assessment to those districts. Finally, the difference between the 2 budget years. And then there's a much larger document coming next, showing pretty excruciating detail that feeds that recap budget. So going from the far left to the right, first you'll see that program, which are those big buckets, general ed, special ed, ELL, and food service that we discussed before. We do break it up by level, so there's pre-K is separate from the district-wide pre-K to 12 category. Those functions, like general ed, special ed that we saw on that first page, or on that recap page. And then you'll see what we're actually spending money on. So in this case, you'll first see teachers, paraeducators, substitutes, managers, etc. Then we'll go through the benefits, and then towards the bottom of each of those sections are the stuff that we spend money on. So the contracted services, utilities, supplies, transportation, whatnot. The columns that continue on here are the same as in the recap, but I've added your FTE columns. So you can see here on that first line, the teachers under special ed, you can see the difference. We've got, we're up 4.2 budget to budget from FY25 to FY26. Reduced staff to be classified as paraeducators from 16 to 14. You may see a few changes in this detail that I didn't highlight in those other slides, and that's generally because we have the same person and we are reclassifying how we're counting them. An example of that would be our tech integrationist at the SU level. We had him on a teacher's contract. We now kind of have to call him an administrator because he's on a longer contract than just the school year. Maybe I'll pause there. Are there any questions on the formatting? And I know you haven't had time to dig into the details, but we can certainly go there as well. Similar in the past, the recap page and the horrible detail page are both documents that we'll put out to your voters on the website. Obviously, the details we won't be digging into, say in a public presentation or in a mailer that we send out. Focusing on recap for those. The next 3 slides are similar to the ones that you see in your local budget discussions as well. Just trying to orient the board to how we spend money and why we spend money. So at the SU level, 3/4 of our budget is people, salaries and benefits primarily. There are a few purchase services, some supplies, which at this level is primarily software that we buy in bulks and give it out to all the schools so we can get a better bang for our buck in terms of some of the programs that they use. And then a big chunk of that, most of that green section would be your transportation contract. Carousel to kids around. This breaks it out, same budget by what we do. So direct instruction first. That's probably primarily the ELL teachers. Special education is a big section. And then a lot of the student support, that first section in green, is also tied to the special education program. Instructional support would be technology in there, as well as staff professional development. A couple of smaller green lines for administration as we go from about 7 to 9 o'clock. That dark green section again is transportation. And then here, food service is broken out instead of people and stuff as the program itself. And that's about 15% of the SU budget. And then as we started doing last year, we've really tried to take some of those costs and allocate them to the different locations where we spend the money. So the red half of the wheel are all costs where we can say pretty definitively, this person's going to spend 2 days of their time each week in this school. Starts with Bakersfield at the top and works around the wheel to the 2 alternative programs at the bottom. The section in gray is transportation. The section in green is food service, 2 programs that we don't part out to the individual schools. And then that quarter called central office would include folks like people you see around the table. There are also some services that we are only delivered at the school level, but we don't have a way right now to predict how they will be divvied out. So that would be like your OT and PT staff, for example. They're going very specifically to where the student needs are. We don't know where those students are going to land right now. And then this is the tax rate chart that you've seen many times in your local meetings. This will be in your 2 town books as well, and no changes. This is actually the current year data, so data we're living in right now. And that's it for the presentation. I will say that again, your 3/4 of your budget is staffing. We've gone over the few increases in staffing. It's really at the general fund level, moving those last remaining ESSER positions in, and then we are contemplating some increases at the special ed level as well. We are still fine-tuning food service estimates. There's a big chunk of revenue that comes with the food service program, so that could really move where your assessment numbers land. I think that in terms of the other revenue we had, both for for special ed and general ed. Pretty much got that dialed into where we know it's gonna end up.
And Morgan, what's the word from Montpelier as far as tackling some of and potentially helping us avoid the challenges we had for last year's budget cycle?
I would
Got
not,
my slideshow out this morning.
would not anticipate that health is coming this year. The Commission on Future Public Education is slated to come out with some recommendations on December 15th for legislative changes that could be made this year and affect the budgets that we're working on right now. Those legislative changes won't be finalized until after we've warned budgets, so it's not going to be super helpful. And what I've been hearing is that there are sort of two different camps that maybe are not going to reconcile their different approaches. One is sort of similar to what we saw last year in terms of cost containment by making it easier to defeat budgets and forcing boards to go back and figure out where to cut, versus structural changes that might help some of the cost drivers, but aren't going to be effective in the 2-month term. They're going to be a year out or a couple of years out. And so there seems to be a break there.
I think the reality is the timing is going to be problematic no matter what it is, because we're gonna have budgets ready to go out the door, and then we're gonna see something come out of the legislature. I mean, what I think that, I'll just add this piece, and you can push back on me if you think something different. I think that there's going to be action. What that action is in terms of rectifying, I think they want to look at cost containment through the lens of spending, but we aren't going to, if you just look at it from the way the system is set up now, we're not going to reap the kind of cost containment that's going to be transformational within the system. I think that there's going to have to be action that is more significant than just driving down cost.
Right. And that it seems that the onus is always on us to do that cutting of budgets, cost containment, and there are no larger systemic changes happening that balance out the pressure, because when you're already the 4th and the 9th lowest spending districts across the state, where do you go? I mean, if you look at health insurance alone at what 12% this year, 13%, so we're almost at 40% in 3 years. And I know we had talked about this at the last NMB meeting, but I would love to see what does that actually look like in dollars, because if like you look at just that, those percentage increases of health insurance alone, and then the onus is on us to try to balance that one, balance that, just that out by what, cutting vital programs and staff that we need to, in order to have opportunities available for our learners. It's a really difficult situation that I'm not understanding why Montpelier isn't seeing this really tricky predicament that especially systems like ours.
I think some people are, Mary. I think some people are seeing that if we only look at making it more challenging to pass budgets, and we only look at it through the lens of reducing spending when you already have really low spending districts and really high spending districts, that same strategy gets applied to both in a way. And it is maybe harder for systems like ours to get budgets approved than some of the higher spending systems. So what that actually does is it drives the discrepancy it's further apart. So the opportunity gap widens, right, if that's the only strategy to look at. I'm feeling that there's more of an investment in doing something in addition to that. Like I can see where things are kind of lining up with some of the things that have come out of the state, and I'll talk about some of that under mine, but There was a report that came out last Friday that I will send to you. I should have sent that. I don't know why I didn't think of it. But it describes the education funding system in the state of Vermont and compares it to other education funding systems across the country. And I think the writing's on the wall that they're gonna look at the whole formula and how we're funding education in general. And there have certainly been a lot of signals that we need to go beyond that, and we need to look at operational configurations of district supervisory unions in schools to try to look for the wider cost containment measures. So I think it's clear something's coming. Whether or not there'll be enough to take action, that will remain to be seen. There's certainly going to be efforts.
And I think given a new Secretary of Education here who is more active than her predecessors have been, given a governor who's probably towards the end of his tenure, and given a legislature that's recently been chastened, I think there's a lot of stars are aligning for them to agree on something which we didn't have a year ago. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but I think there's a lot more tailwind for some pretty big changes.
Thanks.
So as always, I'm happy to answer questions here, answer them offline. People spend their next few evenings wading through all those numbers.
Great. Thanks, Morgan, appreciate it. All right, Lynn.
Okay, I'm just linking that report in to my slideshow, and then I will share it with this board. Do that part. Okay, we'll start with personnel. Did not get my editor's eyes on the slideshow because I will tell you I was up to the wires and hoping there are no typos in this. Under personnel, we don't have anything new under hiring. We do have some resignations. We have Delaney Carr, a behavior technician, para at Steps, Marie Bro, a BT at Rise, and Sarah Clark, who is a BT that was working in Sheldon. In addition to, we have one addition, Emily Maishi, who was a BT at Steps. So that is that's informational. We still have open positions in FNESU. And I just want to say that this is your first meeting here. Stop me if I'm using acronyms that you don't understand, and I'm happy to explain that. Because we have like a lot of acronyms in education. So open positions in FNESU, we would love to find speech and language pathologists. There is a significant shortage of those. We have some, is it one Heather, or is she? Leaves assistant, just want to say, coordinator at Enosburg Elementary School. We are looking for behavior technicians for alternative programs. We are looking for a behavior specialist. Do you want to say the difference between those two? Do either of you want to say that?
Basically, it comes down to credentials.
Okay. So someone who has some of the credentials.
The BCBA has taken
Board certified test.
fancy tests that they
Fancy
pass.
test. Is that what you're about?
No, behavior specialist is different than behavior.
Behavior specialist has bachelor's degree, and is working towards getting their BCBA.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
A special educator, and substitutes. We are definitely in need of substitute teachers, nurses, paraeducators, custodians, and food service. There is a side letter that I had it open and I just closed it. It's right here. So there we have a side letter from the board to, I'm going to tell you what it is and ask you to authorize Mary to sign this side letter. So we'll be looking for action on this. So this would be between FNESU, NMV, and ER, and the Cold Hollow Education Association. We have this Education Human Services program at Cold Hollow Career and Tech Center. They received a grant of $2,500 to support some of the placements that our students are in. So the students at the Career Tech Center that are in that program get to go out and do work-based learning opportunities. So they're doing what's the equivalent of like a co-op experience in classrooms around our supervisory union. So they get to spend a good amount of time in those classrooms, and like having a college level student who is student teaching in your class, there's a level of responsibility that comes with that for the teacher. When you are a cooperating teacher for someone who's in college, usually the program offers a small stipend for those teachers, or of an honorarium. This grant is intended to focus on promising practices for hard to fill positions in the state of Vermont, and teacher is one of those positions. So Emily Kimball has asked if we could pay a stipend of $500 to those cooperating teachers related to that grant. This is not something we would have any intention of building into our budget or doing beyond this. It's a one-time opportunity only because we received the grant. The reason we're doing the side letter is that we would not want the union to think that this is something that's a given for the future. This is not setting a past practice nor a future precedent. So that's the reason for having a side letter. Are there any questions on that? If there are none, I'll ask someone to make a motion to allow Mary to sign the side letter on behalf of the board.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Emily. We'll do that by roll. Akua,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
So the last time we met, I left with a list of information to bring back for this board. And so we had some conversations about some of the data that Michelle shared. She got different data than the data superintendents and others received at our Listen and Learn tour. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. One of the things that people are wondering about is we're hearing about Vermont's performance in declining academic proficiency. So I think it was Akua that asked, how does Vermont compare to other states? So I gathered this data from the only assessment that is the same across states, and that's the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP assessment, that's given every other year. So this is the most recent data from the NAEP assessment. You can see that Vermont fourth graders in reading ranked the 11th highest in the country. In fourth grade math, we're 28th. In eighth grade reading, we're 5th. And in eighth grade math, we're 21st. So you can see, you know, that there's some distinction there when it comes to fourth and eighth grade reading. We're doing okay in terms of our comparison with other states. We're middle of the pack in math, a little low on that fourth grade math side. Certainly not where we're satisfied as a state staying, but I think that this helps to set some context when we talk about the performance of Vermont students in comparison to other states. The last time we met, I talked to you about our class size, looking at how our class size compares with our FNESU class size policy, how it compares with Vermont's education quality standards, and how it compares with the report that I told you about last month, the PICUS report. And I'll just talk about each of these separately. The PICUS report recommendation, which was commissioned by the legislature, will likely be used as they study recommendations that they're going to put into bills this year. So the PICUS report recommends that you have a minimum class size in the elementary school of 15. And in the secondary, which in the Pikus report, I believe it is 4 through 12, is how they captured that of 25 students. Or actually theirs wasn't minimum, it was average. In the ed quality standards, it is K through 3 average of less than 20, and grades 4 through 12 was average of less than 25. Those were the recommendations in Vermont's ed quality standards. In our FNESU policy, there are a variety of minimum class sizes. I know that is really small, so I will read those to you. In FNESU, we have, we break out by grade band, and it is whatever the grade band is, and what's the minimum for math, what's the minimum for reading, and what's the minimum for all other subjects. So in K through 2, math and literacy, our minimum average is 10. For K through 2, there's a typo there. All other, that's what that should say, is 12. So for the other contents. 3 through 6, math and literacy is 12. 3 through 6, all other is 14. And 7 and 8, all except PE are 14. The class size policy at the high school level, the minimum average for cluster is 9 through 12. PE is 20, 9 through 12 music is 15, general classes is 16, special courses is 14, and tech center classes is 10. So it's a lot to unpack. We have a variety of minimum class sizes in the FNESU policy. What you are likely noticing is that all of our minimums are less than the minimums that are recommended by the Pikus report and the minimums that are recommended by the Vermont Ed quality standards. So I took that information and I just did kind of a dipstick of where are we this year. We got in October in your local board meetings, we got information about your class sizes. So I used that data to figure this part out. So we'll start at the top with Bakersfield. They had 2 categories where they were below the minimum class size in the FNESU policy. And that's in that 3 through 6 other and the K through 2 reading. They're below the minimum. In the Pikus and EQS, all the classes were below what those minimum recommendations were. In Berkshire, they met all the minimum class size policies in every category except 7 and 8, and they're below what the minimum class size is for Berkshire, and they are below for Pikus and EQS, but they meet it in all other grade levels. In Cold Hollow, below the FNESU class size policy are the courses up there: Forestry 1, Human Services 1, Business 2, Construction 2, Forestry 2, Human Services 2, and Medical Careers 2. And I'm just now realizing that I labeled those based on the data Courtney, do you know, is AM juniors and PM seniors?
That's how it usually is.
Okay, then I think I have it right. So those are all below the 10. The recommendations in Pikus, and I didn't see anything in EQS, but the Pikus recommendations are much larger than that. It was 25, but they were talking about more modern careers like STEAM and engineering and things like that. I couldn't find in Pikus where it said anything about more traditional CTE programs like forestry and automotive. I couldn't see that. But since all of those categories are larger in every other category than our minimums, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that we're under on all of those. Enosburg Elementary meets the minimum class size for the FNESU policy for all classes, and they also meet the minimum class size for Pikus and EQS. So all those classes are over 15. Enosburg Middle High School, they offer, actually that part is for high school. There are 59 classes that were offered in semester 1. 42 of those classes were below our minimum class size policy, and all classes that were offered in semester 1 were below Pikus and EQS. In Montgomery, there were no classes below the SU policy, no classes below Pikus and EQS. recommendations. Richford Elementary School met all of the FNESU policy recommendations, and in the PICAS and EQS piece, they were below in K2 math, reading, and all others. So it's that K2 band that was below the 15. At Richford Junior Senior High School, again, that's specific to high school, the way I put it in the first column, 33 of 40 classes were below our minimum class size policy in FNESU, and all classes were below the PICAS and EQS. In Sheldon, they were, no classes were below our policy, and no classes were below PICAS and EQS recommendations. To just give some context in terms of the size of the classes and the programs that we have here. Are there any questions, comments about that?
So then in your estimation then, when you're looking at these, what does it kind of trigger as far as what's actionable or what needs to change, if anything?
Right. So I think that one of the things that we're needing to do is examine the class sizes, the number of classes that we're offering at our two high schools. And I think looking at those class sizes, and I am not recommending that we reduce staff at this point. I think we need further examination, and it feels a little premature to jump in and make reductions in that area right now before we get a clear direction from the state, because I do think there will be something related to ratios that comes out of the legislative session. I do think that there is room for us to do some work around more flexible use of staffing in those schools, because there are some gaps in terms of some positions that have been difficult to fill. Intervention is one example in the high school, and thinking about how we can utilize existing staff to think about how we meet the needs of the kids who need more intensive and targeted intervention and support, and also thinking about the virtual learner work and whether there is some way for us to flexibly use staff to help support that transition in that work. But those are all really preliminary. I need to engage the principals in more of this work, and I did not have this done in time to do that with them, so we haven't done that yet.
Hey, Lynn, this is Akua. This really helpful data, and I appreciate it. I can make some deductions based on what I'm seeing, but I was wondering if we could have data that we can specifically bump against the averages to look at how our averages compare to the ones you showed in the previous slide.
Can you say just a little bit more? Are you talking raw data?
Right, raw data for our districts, or our schools in our districts, and how they compare to the Vermont Education Quality Standard recommended averages.
So you have that already. You got that in October. I can certainly send it back to you. In your October, the data that I used to do this chart was based on the reports that each board received in October that showed you got a report from both of the high schools, the CTE center, and all of the elementary schools by district. It didn't collate it all together to be able to look at like the elementary schools and NMB in ER, but you have that raw data. Is that something you're wanting me to bring back to the next meeting?
No, not necessarily. I can go back and dig it out. My apologies. I didn't remember that we saw that. So I can go and take that and bump it up against it. Yeah, it would be nice to be able to kind of put those numbers side by side if it's not already done. So I'll pull it out. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I put the slide before this, Akua. I put a picture of it, but Courtney, maybe what we'll do is put the actual slide that has the link to the PICAS report and the link to the EQS. Would that be helpful, Akua?
Sure. Yes. Thank you.
That was from last month. Remember that? Thank you. So also there was a request at the last meeting to bring data related to research on the impact of small class sizes. I will admit I did not have a ton of time to dig into the research, but I had a little time. I went to John Hattie's research that tends to be pretty well respected in the education world. John Hattie is someone who, the book I was looking at was Visible Learning by John Hattie, and within that link, you can see, or if you could click that link, just a picture of the cover of the book, and then there's a section on small class sizes, and what is interesting, he studies all kinds of strategies, evidence-based practices in education, and he tries to determine what's the effect size. If you use this strategy, how much growth can you expect with your students? So if a effect size of 0.46 or more is considered significant, and that's something we should look at in terms of an evidence-based practice. So when I looked at Hattie's work and I looked at the effect size for, if you go back to the slideshow, please, Courtney, the effect size for reducing class size was 0.21. But interestingly, this is national research, and when we're talking about class sizes in Vermont, it's very different than the context nationally. When people are talking about reducing class sizes, they're often talking about going from 30 students to 20 students, or 25, in this case, in Hattie's, it was looking at going from 25 to 15. So much larger class sizes to begin with. So there's some variability in the class size research, or in that section of John Hattie's book, but again, it was a different context because generally most of our class sizes in Vermont are well below that. I did see that there was some evidence from the Brookings Institute of reducing an elementary class size from 22 to 15, that had an effect size equal to 3 months gain. But again, reducing to 15 is what the PICUS report and the EQS are asking us to get to. So it's looking at different end of the spectrum. And there were some other bodies of research that I did, this is where I ran out of time. I can pull them if you want more, but it was looking at smaller class sizes, and it was saying that in the early elementary grades, and this is also reflected in the PICUS report, there is some positive research that supports having smaller class sizes of 15 in the early elementary grades as kids are really learning those early literacy and early numeracy skills. But we're not talking super small class sizes, we're talking 15. Any questions on that? We also had some questions last time on, let's talk about Franklin Northeast and kind of how did we get here? So this was work I did back in 2018 when we were working on the merger, 2018 and 2019. So here's a little history lesson about Franklin Northeast. So Franklin Northeast was formed in 1950 when the school districts in Berkshire, Montgomery, and Richford were joined as a supervisory union. So that is, the central office at that time was in Richford, which was in between Montgomery and Berkshire. In 1924, Enosburg Town School District joined FNESU. And back then, Enosburg had 2 school districts. They had the Enosburg Town School District and the Enosburg Falls ID School District. That ID school district joined in 1940. In 1954, both of those 2 Enosburg districts merged together to form one district. In 1968, Bakersfield joined FNESU. And then if you fast forward to Act 46 merger, in 2017, Bakersfield and Berkshire voluntarily merged to form the NMV-UUSD. We did that by vote of the communities. Sheldon was assigned to FNESU in 2019 by Act 46 State Board order. And in 2019, Montgomery and Sheldon merged with the NMV UUSD. And in 2019, Enosburg and Richford merged to form the Enosburg-Richford UUSD. So that's the history of where we are or where we have been in terms of governance structure. So you can see over time, it has evolved into including the 6 towns that we currently include. In terms of historical data, in terms of academic performance, I don't have a great way to get that, Akua. I know that was one piece that you were asking for. I have not reached out to the agency to see if there's change over time related to this, for us to see some comparison. If that is important to you, I can reach out to see if they have, I don't know if they have warehouse data. That's something that we've been talking about for probably 15 years in the state of Vermont, is having a data warehouse, and we do not yet have one, but they might be able to get it to me another way. Would you like me to do that, Akua?
Sorry, I was having a hard time. No, I'm good for now. I'm happy to review what you've provided and then come back with questions if I have any.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the data that Michelle shared, I was preparing that for this meeting, but I was notified last Friday that there's a new data set that has been revised. When the state, we went to the Listen and Learn tour, each community was given a SU profile. So I got this report about Franklin Northeast. After that Listen and Learn tour, the agency got a lot of feedback about some of the data wasn't inaccurate because it wasn't clear how they were pulling those numbers from the state reports. So there is a lot of work that has been happening behind the scenes to correct some of the data pieces. So I didn't want to offer up data knowing that new data is coming. So I'm going to bring that back in December. I believe you've been a part of some of that data revision. It's reasonable to think I will have it before the next meeting.
Sure.
Kind of, sort of, hopefully. Okay. Also, I will send a slideshow to you when I get the live links on the visual. And I just put under other the Vermont Ed Funding System report, and that's the piece that came out last Friday. And this is 37 pages long. And apparently that is how long it takes to describe the complexity of Vermont's education funding system. They actually did a pretty good job.
I was impressed with it.
Yeah, like it is, Vermont has an extremely complicated funding system, and they did a pretty good job of breaking it down into understandable pieces, but you gotta stick with it and go all the way through the report to understand all of it. They also did a really good job of describing how the way we fund education in Vermont is very different from almost every other state. So it gives you some context about how other states fund education. And in that context, there are likely tips for what might be right ahead of us in terms of where the legislature is going with this. So I encourage you, if you have a little bit of time to read that. I think it is a useful report and it's pretty well done. And that is all I have. No, that's under board.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, the collective bargaining?
Yeah,
We're
we
gonna
have
do
that
that.
under your.
Okay, it's under both, it looks like it's under both.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, it is?
yeah,
Did I have that under mine?
Yeah.
We can do it now if you want.
yeah, that's fine, I'm gonna go ahead and do it now.
Sure.
Okay.
So we met with the support staff. I've reported to this board before that we met 3 times in the winter going into the spring. We were not able to come to an agreement for a successor contract. So we were at impasse. So we went into mediation with the support staff union, it took quite some time to get those meetings scheduled. So we ended up meeting with them 2 times once in October and once in early November, I believe. And at the very end of the second mediation session, we came to an agreement. So the way this works is that all the boards need to ratify the agreement, and all of the groups within each of the school need to also ratify the agreement. So tonight, I think they probably are done with their ratification process. They had their last schools tonight voting on whether or not to ratify this. So although we were hoping for more than 1 year in this process, we were unable to get that. So we ended with a 1-year contract that is from June 2024 to July 2024 to June 2025. So all current support staff will receive $2.25 an hour, retroactive back to July 1, 2024. There are a few other pieces in there. School year employees will be paid 1 extra holiday for Christmas Eve. School year employees will receive an extra day of in-service training. The current starting grid will be adjusted so the base pay is $18 an hour. All other contract language remains status quo, and the parties are working to draft new contract language based on this agreement. So this is the ratification document. The union has already signed the tentative agreement. So I'd ask that the board make a motion to allow Mary to sign this tentative agreement on behalf of the board.
I'll make that motion. By roll, Akua.
Aye.
Emily.
Aye.
Zach.
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Not great timing
No.
for signing. Okay. So,
Doesn't have to be pretty.
what's that?
Doesn't have to be pretty.
I'll do my best. All right, moving on. Here, right? Okay. Then Gab.
I think the only thing I want to add to the notes is that I'm pretty excited about, I'm putting together a student experience committee. I'm focusing on 9th graders, and I'm going to try to roll them up. And I have some Richford kids and some Enosburg kids, and I'm hoping that our first meeting is going to be in December.
Great, thanks. All right, Michelle, Robin, do either of you have anything you want to add to your report? Yeah. Okay, Michelle Irish.
I don't have anything to add. I think I'm pretty excited. We have 3 different opportunities happening for students to get involved in a lot of this work. So there's 2 things happening in the next couple of weeks, and then 1 thing in January with the Sweethearts and Heroes work that we're continuing at Enosburg. And that was made available to us by a very generous grant from the Champlain Chevy. So they came forward and asked to sponsor a program in the Enosburg schools. So they're going to continue that work. This will be year 2 of that program there. So we're very excited about that. And then we're working to put together a professional learning day to support our Educators of Color as part of our teacher retention and recruitment process. So we've been working hard to recruit teachers, to diversify our workforce, and we have a number this year of teachers who we're hoping to kind of get some teachers from around the region to kind of create some community for them to be able to network together. So that'll happen hopefully in December.
Great, thank you. Heather.
The middle high school conference that we went to last week, some of the coordinators and myself was really good, and we got some good strategies. We're really excited at some of the sites to have middle school information nights to try to get improve our participation rate at our middle school. So we're gonna bring them in, talk with them, and then have some laser tag in the school to show them some different exciting things that we could do with programming. The laser tag was purchased through the Richford Junior Senior High School's Vermont Youth Project last year. And I can share later with you our winter session brochures are complete now and being distributed. And so just like a little summary too of the Vermont Youth Project, we've concluded our 5 years as official Vermont Youth Project sites for Innisburg and Richford, and we're going to keep on the youth councils as part of the LEAPS programs. We're partnering with doing that anyway. The kids were really excited about having leadership opportunities, and we're going to be doing some fundraising to fund some out-of-the-box projects to support their peers. And then there was the creation of a community 501c3 to open a youth center in Enosburg and Richford. The Enosburg one has been opened. There's some pictures in there. And we will be, I say we because I am on that board as a community member volunteer, working on a grant this winter to help with funds for the Richford one as well. So that's kind of a great project that came out of participating in this, just some outside of school space for youth, and we're partnering, using the space. Michelle and Robin's students use the space during the day. LEAPS is using the space as a LEAPS after school project when we don't have the youth center stuff going on in there to make sure we're utilizing that rented space as much as possible and giving kids access to more opportunities.
The pictures here, the one is the space in Enosburg.
Yeah.
It looks awesome.
And this is pretty great.
Yeah, it's so awesome. I love it. And you said the select board in Enosburg has been part
So it
of
was
setting this up?
it was the village trustees. They agreed to be the fiscal agents so that when funds were applied for, they managed the money and did all of that. But the 501c3 is in transition to take that over out of the village's hands. So the project will be overseen purely by the 501c3.
Nice. And you're then trying to do a comparable one in Richford.
Well, the 501c3 is set up so that it can do both.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just, it might have a different name, the actual youth center, but the 501c3 will have the capacity to do both.
Nice.
You have a board member from Richford.
I
on
do.
this, correct?
Yes, yep, so we have a Richford board member, 2 Enosburg board members, and 1 countywide board member. And we are going to be recruiting high school students, and so our criteria is going to be at least 1 Richford high school student, 1 Enosburg high school student, and then a 3rd student from either community to make sure that the 501c3 is taking into consideration both communities as they make decisions.
Nice.
And it's a Cold Hollow student in one of the pictures painting a mural.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
They, the Cold Hollow Human Services group actually, it's kind of hard to see if there's chalkboards with norm and agreements for this space, and they did some research working with youth centers throughout the state to come up with what those norms ought to be. So it's more student driven in that sense.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks, Heather. Jamie.
So my computer died, so I can't look at anything, but in addition to all the data that I put in there, my changes each month, so we hired 2 support staff and 1 professional, or we had 1 professional and 2 support staff resign since the last meeting. And let's see. The one update for this month, my open enrollment paperwork is going out by Friday. So staff have from Thanksgiving break to Christmas break to sign up for insurance, any changes that they want in effect for January 1. We currently are a little bit higher on the number of employees that are on our insurance, maybe because we're more fully staffed. But also each month I'm getting a lot of emails because Vermont Health Connect is now, after COVID, kind of cracking down on all of the renewals. So they want staff that can get it at work to take it at work and not stay on the Vermont Health Exchange. So we are getting more and more people coming onto our employer healthcare. And then over the next couple of weeks, I'll be working on sending out new wage and hour amendments to all support staff. And then we'll also be working on the retroactive pay that they get. The July one.
Will be, just so the board knows, we were not allowed to share anything with support staff. It had to come from their union leadership team, so we haven't communicated anything. Friday, the newsletter will go out that will have all of the details about what they can expect in terms of when they'll get their final compensation with this old rate, when they'll get a check for the back pay, and when they'll get the check that reflects the new wage that they have. And we chose to do a separate pay for the back pay so that they don't get whacked with the extra tax. So they'll be running an additional payroll to get that out.
Thank you. Dawn?
So we've been doing a lot of meals lately with the holiday meal. This week we'll wrap up all of those meals that are going to be done with two being done tomorrow. So it's been a busy, crazy, hectic week in the world of food service. We had a great turnout in our elementary schools so far, and the last two elementary schools will have theirs tomorrow.
Dawn, I know that's been a ton of work for you and all of your staff members, and I just want to thank you. I know we've seen lots of pictures and we've heard from people who've been able to go to those holiday meals in the schools, and everyone is raving about it. So thank you for all you're doing for the food programs and to all your staff.
Yeah, the staff really take pride in this one and do a great job with it. So
They really do. Thank you so much, Dawn. Melissa?
I have nothing to add, but just wanted to highlight the community of practice that I mentioned in my notes, where the early ed teachers are coming together and independently digging into our Get Set for School curriculum that focuses on early literacy and math skills, and really working on consistency across the schools. And it's really exciting. A lot of classrooms have, closed Facebook pages, and they'll post pictures for families, and it's just exciting to see them all engaging in their learning and with the materials, singing the songs, and it's all strengthening our multi-tier systems of support.
Thank you so much. Okay, no burn, so we're moving on to board business. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, December 18th at 2024 at the central office. Anything else from anyone on the board? Any further discussion? Okay, well, I wish everyone a really happy Thanksgiving. Have a lovely time off, and I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all so much. Be well.
Everyone.